Hello, everyone, and welcome to the sixth in our user group series. Want to welcome you to today's session. Today we're going to be discussing how to navigate the project workshop and determine the source of data. It's geared more towards an audience of authors, and as I'm going through the slides, or the next few slides, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to raise your hand, and I will answer the question as I'm going through the slides. And then at the end, I'm actually going to be doing a demo within the Advisor software itself to show you what I've discussed. If I'm able to answer your question immediately, I'll do that right away. If not, I will get back to you today by email. And if at any point you're unable to hear me, or your screen stopped showing what I am displaying on mine, please feel free to raise your hand also so that we can correct that immediately also. That said, what we want to discuss today are sources. So in the Advisor software you have data sources, but there's sources also of information additionally that I want to discuss. The first thing I want to discuss is the tables. How are the tables sourced? And secondly, the field within the tables. A lot of times you may find yourself working within the project, and you'll ask yourself, knowing your tables, what fields they contain, how did this get over here and why is this here? Or I don't understand why this is in this table if it's not even a part of the original table. And what I want to do today is show you how it is that you can manipulate the data so that you can make a field that was not initially part of a table now become a part of it. So the first thing I'll cover are tables and how can they be sourced. You can source tables when you load them via text files. You can source them from Excel worksheets. You can source them from databases such as Access. You can also source them from Salesforce databases and relational databases like SQL Server or Oracle. The last way that you can source a table is by actually creating a roll-up within the Advisor software itself and creating a new table. And that would bring in an additional table that that you did not load from an outside source, but it creates a table within the software itself. So that explains how tables are sourced. How are fields sourced? Well, the fields can be sourced from tables that you initially loaded into the Advisor software. They can be sourced from copying from one table to another within the software. They can be sourced by creating them using the expression builder within the software, and they can also be sourced when you do a roll-up, creating a new table from an existing table. How do you find the source of a table? Within the project workshop, when you open up the project workshop, what you get is a list of, that contains the project. It includes the tables, and if this were expanded down here at the bottom, it would also show you the field names. So when you go to the project workshop, if you highlight the table name and you look over to the right, it says source. This is going to tell you the source of this table. You want to look at the icon because the icon is going to tell you what the source of the data is. Now, how do you know what the icons stand for? Well, what looks like a barrel right here, this indicates that this table was loaded as an outside source. It could have been loaded from a text file, from SQL Server database, from an Excel spreadsheet, from a CSV file. Whatever that source is, it was not created within Advisor. It was actually sourced outside and brought into Advisor. When you see this sigma sign right here, this indicates that the table was rolled up from another table that was brought in within the Advisor software itself. What we saw earlier was the source that I was pointing out that shows you the icons. You have two tabs. You have a Properties tab and a Usage tab. Now, this Properties tab gives you some really good and valuable information when you're looking at your table information. For one, it tells you the number of fields within the table that you have highlighted. Let me go back. It also shows you the number of rows within that table. It gives you the source, and it gives you all the fields that are within that actual table itself. Additionally, what it does is it allows you to see if that field is actually being used within the project at the time. It tells you the data type, and again, it gives you the source again. If you want to modify the data types of these fields, and that's actually another webinar altogether, but you could actually click on this Modify button, and if for whatever reason this class here you wanted to bring in as an integer rather than a string, you could click on this icon right here, and it would allow you to change it to an integer, and then when you reload the data again, it would come in as an integer. That's the Properties tab. On the Usage tab, when you click on the Usage tab, it tells you every location within the project that that table is being used. So right now we're looking at the affiliations table that was loaded as an outside source, and this is telling us that there's actually something, a field, whatever manner, this table is being used in a bar chart, or actually the field, the primary affiliation field is being used in the bar chart on the affiliation tab. The level is being used in the bar chart on the affiliation tab. The record type is being used in the bar chart on the affiliation tab. The affiliation is being used in a bar chart on the affiliation tab. It also tells us that this particular table is linked by selection and by color to the core table. So now we know how this affiliations table is affecting the project across the board because we can see everywhere that it's being used in. Does anyone have any questions so far? All right. That said, let me move ahead. What we just discussed and covered were the tables. Now we get a little bit more detailed. Within the tables, there are fields. And how can you find the source of a field? When you go to the project workshop, rather than just highlighting the table name, this time expand it. Expand the table, and you see all the fields that are included within that table itself. If you go over to the right on the Properties tab, it'll tell you the source. Remember I said fields can be sourced by the expression builder, via table copy, via rollup, or even just by a data load. This is going to tell you the source of those tables, or of those fields that you're looking at within a table itself. That's one way you can look at the source of a field. The other way that you can look at a source of a field is you can actually highlight an actual field name, and on the Properties tab, it will update the tab to show you and provide for you information about the field that you just highlighted. So right now it's telling us this annual fund commit field is in the appeals table. It was brought in as a double, the data type, and the source of this field, it was copied. It was brought in by a selection link. So it was copied over from the appeal results table, and this is the actual link key to the appeals table, which is this table, with the same link key. What I'm showing you here are essentially the icons, so that visually you can immediately see and start to learn what these icons represent when you're looking for the source of fields themselves. So first, when you see the drum barrel, again, obviously that's telling you it was brought in from an outside source. The sigma means that it was sourced from a roll-up. The link wizard icon here is telling you that it was copied over from one table to another, and the expression builder icon is telling you that this field was actually manipulated or created from another field within the project itself. So what I'm going to do right now, I know I've covered a bunch of icons, a bunch of information, but I'm going to show you within the software how it is that I might look at a field and try to find out where the field actually came from. So let me go into the advisor software. What I have right now is a demo project with Scrub Data, and the one thing I didn't cover earlier was how do I get to the project workshop. If you go up here to the View menu and expand that menu, you can click on Project Workshop, and that's going to open up the actual project workshop itself. And now you're starting to see the icons, or some of the icons that I was describing earlier in the PowerPoint presentation. When I highlight this, the tables, immediately what it does is it gives me some information about the project itself. Right now there are 16 tables in this project. There are 313 fields total and roughly 6 million rows within this project. Down here are all the tables that are within this project. This barrel obviously tells me that it was loaded from an outside source. This is telling me right here these are rolled up tables. So these weren't loaded from an outside source. These were created within the project itself after other tables were loaded in. And if I scroll down, it gives me an overall view of the entire project and their tables. It also tells me if these tables are actually in use. So a lot of times I may find myself in a situation where I've loaded a bunch of tables and in the end I didn't actually use every table. I can actually modify this information so that it will not bring in the table in the future if I know that I'm not going to be using it. Right now, when I clicked on Modify for the outside sources, this gives me the location of the actual file that I brought in outside of Advisor, if you want to know where that's at. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to expand this table so that we can see the actual individual tables themselves. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go ahead and highlight one of these tables, and as I described earlier, it's giving me the source here. This appeals table was sourced outside. It was brought in at a data load. Right here it gives me all of the field names, the data types, and the source of the fields within there. You'll start seeing that there's a lot of fields within this table that were never even brought in with the table itself. Right now this appeal code field was brought in with the table. This date sent was brought in with the table. This ID number was brought in with the table. But all these other fields, they're not part of the original table. And that's going to be very useful for you when you're trying to find out how did this field get here and why is it here to begin with. If I click on the Usage tab, it's also giving me information about where this table is being used. And this table is being used in a myriad of places within the project itself. Not only is it telling me if it's being used in a chart, if it's being used on a page, but it's telling me also, hey, this field's being used in a data manipulation within the expression builder itself in a calculation. Now what I'll do is I'll expand this appeals table, and the field that I was working with that I wanted to cover was this annual fund commit. This annual fund commit field, when I highlight the field and I use the properties and I click on the properties tab, this is telling me that this was sourced from another table. It was actually copied from another table. There's two things I can do at this point. First, I can see where it's being used. These are all the locations where this annual fund commit field is being used, not necessarily within this table, but across the board. I can either click on this link to show me the origin table. All right, this field arrived at this table from the appeal results table. So in the appeal results table, it was copied over to the appeals table using this origin key. And there's the annual fund commit field. The other thing I can do is I can just modify this at its source. And this is the actual link. Here's the appeal results table. Here's the field key. This is how it got to the table that it's at right now, appeals. And this is the key. And this is how it came over. If I want to undo this, I can either undo it or I can add using these field keys to this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this appeal results table. Based on this is telling me that this came over from the appeal results table. So I want to go to the appeal results table. Here's the appeal results table. This table was actually rolled up from another table. This is telling me the giving table was rolled into this appeal results table. So let me open this up. Here's this annual fund commit field. Remember, this annual fund commit got here. I'm sorry, let me use this pen right here. This annual fund commit field right here arrived here from here. So let me look at the source of this. This was sourced from the giving table. And the giving table was rolled into the appeal results. So again, there's two things that you can do to see how this came over. I can click on the link and it's telling me giving was rolled up on this particular source key field and two fields were brought over, ID number and annual fund commit. Or, let me click the back green arrow, I can click on this modify at the source and this brings up the actual wizard where the roll-up was created. So giving was rolled up on this field into this table name, and the fields that were brought over were the ID number, which was copied over, and the annual fund commit, which was summed up. So now that I know that the annual fund commit field here came from a roll-up, I think I want to go to that giving table. So the easiest way for me to do it is I'll just click on that link and then go to the source table itself. Here's the source table. Here's the giving table. So let me find this annual fund commit field. I believe it's this one right here. Is it being used in the project? Yes. Here's the data type, but this is not the actual original field itself. This is telling me that this was manipulated or calculated to create this field. This icon right here is the expression builder right there. So what I want to do is I'm going to click on this. And now you're seeing that we're in the giving table. Here's the annual fund commit field. The source is the expression builder. So two things I can do here. I can look at the expression itself, and it's going to show me that. Or if I click the back green arrow and say modify it at the source, I'm getting closer and closer to that, to the original location. And it looks like this is the original location because there aren't any other field names within this calculation. So this annual fund commit field is actually a field that was calculated outright within the advisor software, and this is the calculation that was used to create this field, which was then rolled into the appeal results table, which was then copied over into the appeals table. I took a little bit longer than it would normally take me to find the source of a field, but I wanted to go through it step by step so that you can see how it is that I might start at a point and start going backwards to find the original location of a field within the project. That's one that I had pre-prepared to actually show you today. Just on the fly, if I were to grab any one of these, this appeal period, I can immediately just look at this appeal period one. Let me highlight it. This is telling me that this came from another table called the appeal header table. If I go to the appeal header table, and here's the appeal header, here's that appeal period field. I click on that field. This is telling me that this was sourced from the expression builder. So I can actually click modify it, or click modify, and this is actually the original location of this field because I don't see any field names in here. So this field itself was calculated and created within the software itself. I'm making it seem a little easy. I may also be confusing you slightly, and I hope that's not the case, but essentially that is how I would source out or find the source of a field within the project. Prior to this project workshop, when we had the data workshop, we used to have to spend a lot longer time deciphering where the information came from. One final thing that I wanted to show you is what if you don't want to go through all of this? You just, you want to look at something tangible that will show you where the information came from. I'm highlighting this right here, this this green arrow up. If I click on that, it allows me to export the data schema of this project. So what I do is I leave this first line checked, and I tell it where I would like it to extract the data schema of these projects. So what I'll do is tell it I want it here. Then I'll click export. It immediately exports that data schema for me, and if I go to that location, let me drop all this down and open this up. Now I've got all these CSV files. You see these tables right here, data sources? It gives me a list of all my data sources as they are in the project itself. That's one option. The other thing that it does is it gives me the tables for each of those data sources and the fields. Now this is only going to give you the fields that were brought in from the original tables themselves. But don't fret, because we also have where is it? We have this table fields also, and we have, where is it? the calculated fields. So if there were any fields that were created within the project itself, this would tell you, in the appeal header table, a field was created called appeal description, and this is the actual calculation that was used to create this field. So regardless of where you're at or what you're doing, with this project workshop, there's really no way to get lost. I do recommend practicing with it a little bit, because the more you play with it, the more intuitive it's going to become for you. But does anyone have any questions? I know I've been going on, but if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them for you. All right. Well, I said this was going to be short, but we're actually spot on. It's 12:28. I thank you all for joining this webinar, this user group series. And if you do find yourselves have any questions after we end this webinar, feel free to drop me a line. My name's Al Morales. I'm at amorales@advisorsolutions.com, or contact us at support@advisorsolutions.com. And hope you're able to garner something from this webinar, and you all have a great day and a great weekend. Take care.